I'm AJ Gutierrez, the co-founder of Saga Education and host of EdHeads. Today, we have the opportunity to connect with Dwayne Matthews, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at TomorrowNow Learning Labs. Today, we explore innovations in AI and look far ahead on how we can leverage these emerging technologies in education, and more importantly, how we can co-design with schools and districts. This is EdHeads.
Your story and your upbringing is so inspirational to me, so fascinating to me. You know, you were born in Toronto, you moved to Trinidad, and can you tell me about what that experience was like for you, traveling between those locations and the impact it had on you personally and culturally?
Trinidad is a really unique place in the sense that it's in the Caribbean, but it's not a tourist destination. It has a very small population, but it has a significant amount of natural resources. And so it creates an interesting dichotomy. So there's a real brilliance to it, but there's a high crime rate to it, and all of those components, but there's an identity piece and almost a confidence that comes with growing up there. And I think I was very fortunate in my formative years to have that upbringing and to have that confidence sort of embedded in me culturally on a large scale. So I've lived in Trinidad and Tobago. I've lived in Toronto. I moved out of Toronto to a city called Windsor. I lived in Peru for a number of years. It really has sort of helped me to not feel like I'm home anywhere and to feel like I'm always observing. And there are downsides to that, but there's a lot of upsides to that, because then, I'm always curious when I'm observing the world out ahead of me.
What was that experience like for you transitioning to Toronto? I mean, did you feel like you faced any headwinds, and what was it like for you? I mean, you went back when you were in high school effectively as a critical growth year.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
When I got there in grade 9, I was 6 feet tall, broad shoulders. And the phys ed teacher walked over and he's like, yeah, I went to a school and I might've been 25% of the black population. And he walked over, he said, you're going to be our basketball star. And I was like, hey, yeah, I go, I'm not. So he's like, oh, we don't appreciate all that modesty and all that kind of stuff. But truth and in fact is I'd never played basketball in my life at that point. And I was a swimmer and I liked chess. And, he just could not conceptualize that, back then that I would have this sort of broad perspective on things. And I wasn't able to play a sport that he thought that at 6 feet tall, grade 9, that I should be able to play.
In many ways, you are a citizen of the globe, and you started a trajectory in teaching, and you had the opportunity to teach in Peru. Was there like a defining moment in that experience that kind of catapulted you into a career in education and innovation?
I had taken just about every single course that I could take that wasn't science and math in university, and I was running out of options in terms of new courses to take, and I was quite lost. And so my ex-girlfriend at the time, who I just mentioned previously, I really wanted to reconnect with her, and we were standing, it just so happens that we were standing in the registrar's office at the same time, and she said, what are you doing after school? And I said, I still don't know. And she says, I'm going to Teachers College. Here are the forms. You should think about that as well. And that's how I signed up for Teachers College, and I went to my first 2 days in a grade 4 class with a gentleman by the name of Roman Juski. And I was just so inspired and enthralled, and I absolutely loved it. Fast forward, I get to Peru. I'm teaching in Peru at an international school, and we're driving to the jungle, and we're driving through this town called La Oroya, which is, it's probably one of the most polluted towns. It's a mining town. And I had an experience there where I thought, gosh, I have to leave teaching and I really want to get into clean technology. So I got into an industry called open innovation. And that was a really pivotal moment for my education career, because open innovation, what it does is it looks for innovation outside of an industry and looks for ways to bring that innovation into the industry. And the reason for that was to keep pace with technological change. And I realized that this was something that education desperately needed. And I sort of hit my, this is what I'm supposed to do moment.
Now, fast forwarding to now with, TomorrowNow Learning Labs, like, how are you, like, tell me more about that work and how are you kind of, igniting a new era of innovation in education?
Somewhere around 2017, I was introduced to something called generative design by Autodesk. And I started to realize that based on Moore's law, generative design was an AI platform that would essentially become more available to people in about 24 to 48 months. And so then I got really excited. COVID hits and I have my son, he's sitting at home, and I go to him, he's 10 at the time, and I said, let's create a new way of school. Let's create a learning lab together. So my son's actually a co-founder at 10. And so we sat back and we looked at what's all the technologies that we can use. What are all the methods that we can use? What are some things that we're learning about in neuroscience? And can we put that into a protocol? The idea for TomorrowNow Learning Lab was to take the lab idea and place it, to create a protocol, to place it into schools and say, if we incubate this in the school and it grows, if we do a good job, it should grow to show A, what's possible, and then B, how do we start to cannibalize the remainder of the traditional model?
People often say that the system is broken. And again, I'm guilty of saying this myself, but you think this is the wrong point of view. And can you tell me a little bit more why?
We took, by Western standards, a 600-year-old technology, right, which is the printed book. We had wraparound technologies. So a pencil in 1662, the ballpoint pen in 1888, blackboard in 1801, and we created a strategy called school. And that strategy really helped to place citizens in different levels of society. And the assumption about society was that we're trying to grow something, but it's scarce. So if you have scarcity, then you're going to have inequity. Because if there's scarcity, somebody has to come out making sure that they're hoarding and somebody's going to be short. So for somebody to know if I'm going to be successful or not in a scarce environment, I'm going to have to show them that I've memorized what's in those books in a moment in time. And we call that an assessment or a test. We have 192 days to remember as much as humanly possible. We take some kind of assessment and we go through a stage gate, and we walk through different stage gates across, maybe 15, 20 years. And at the end of that, we have about 30% of the population that comes out, 30 to 50%, depending on which population, that comes out post-secondary educated. Today, we realize that we're not necessarily in a limited environment. Our economies can go beyond our borders. We have new innovations that are mobile. I can put every single book in my phone, in the cloud, on a computer. And so now, and I can also start to think about abundance versus scarcity. So I can start to create value based on ideas, and ideas are limitless.
Tell me a little bit more about, from an equity lens, how do you feel, is it going to be equitable? I mean, for people who look like me,
our opportunities, they're not limitless, but where we are to what's possible is significantly more value. So are we going to have, objective equity? No, I don't think so, because it moves. Equity is based on what you need at the time. And as time goes on, you're going to need different things. So it's a moving target, which makes it very, very challenging. But are we going to have more equity? Yes, I definitely think so. Why? Because now people have options. So for example, I came from Trinidad and Tobago. When I was there, there weren't any bookstores that I can remember that were not school bookstores. And I had to take a specific exam based on a Cambridge system to get into the best schools. So if the best school that had, maybe 1,500 students had the best library and I didn't get in, I never have access to that library ever, right? And that's actually quite profound. and I take that exam at 11. But today, my cousins, they have just as much access to information as I do through their phone. They can get a free Harvard course. They can get BitTorrents. They can leverage AI platforms. And so really it's, do they have the ability to ask the right questions and to curate those question stacks is really what allows them to unlock their genius.
For the people who are still trying to figure out how to program their coffee machine, it's like, what is AI and how are people using it in education?
So now with this, you can start to curate ideas and information very quickly. And it's sort of brought into a really sort of dialogue kind of way for a person to respond to. So I think there's lots of opportunities there.
Let's say you're a district leader in the US and you're managing a large school system. Like, what role do you see these types of technologies like ChatGPT playing in the context of educational delivery in the long term? Like, what's the future of schooling from your perspective?
The big way of looking at it as a district leader is thinking you have a form of school and you've been optimizing on the form, but the shift is really to look at the function of school and to optimize on that function. Now, the challenge is going to be, how do I turn the Titanic? And the way that I would think about that is you put a small boat in the water. So you create these open innovation labs and experiences that allow you to do that. And instead of going to try and get everybody to convert to AI, as a district leader, I would look at how can I create these small experiments and how could I find the already converted teachers and say, what do we actually want to do? How do we want to prepare for the future? And can we make models that are compelling?
I would love to hear from you. Like, do you feel like we ought to head in a trajectory where we're just leveraging these technologies more? Or do you think we should try to explore ways we can use these technologies to enhance human connection? What are some of your thoughts on that?
One of the things that I say all the time is the future of education is human-led, purpose-driven, and technology-augmented. And I just talked a little bit about the job to be done. So let's think about that in practical sense. One of the best singers of all time, contemporary-wise, Beyonce. She's amazing, right? She looks amazing. She sounds amazing. And if I were to get the perfect experience, right? The perfect experience, I could have a Beyonce concert in a VR headset. I could put on the best noise cancellation headphones that I could find, and I could create that experience right in my living room. But that's not what happens. People line up for hours. They pay hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars. They save money, they sell stuff to go to a concert where you don't see her as clearly as you would in the VR headset. You're probably not sitting in a really close spot. She's not going to sound as pitch perfect, but we still go to these concerts. What that says to me is that there is a compelling component of being human that somehow we intrinsically know that we have to create human relations, whether they be shallow ones, deep ones, whether they just have people standing next to us. There's something in us that community is important, and I don't think that goes away. And I think AI gives us a moment of pause, right? We sort of got hit with a brick with social media. We didn't really see it coming. We didn't see all the techniques, but now there's not one country that I go to where people are not concerned about the impact of algorithmic nudging, the impact of variable interval scheduling in social media. And even young people are thinking, how do we get past this? And so I think this is a really good opportunity with AI for us to think about how do we take AI to actually make us more human. And historically, if we look at it, technology has actually allowed us to enhance our humanity.
What do you think are some really good examples of organizations, or maybe with your organization, where you can be using these technologies to deepen connection with humans, with one another. Maybe there's ways in which these technologies are allowing teachers to become more efficient and more effective so that they can focus on what matters, which is making sure that students feel connected to a caring adult in school.
In terms of a practical sense, I've seen schools where students are now they have an AI-enhanced online course supported by a teacher, and they're working for 2 hours a day in content. So what do they do with the other 4 hours? Well, they have intentional socialization, working on projects, going out to meet people out into the field, thinking about how they interact with each other, which typically is, when we talk about schools, that's the piece that we know is missing.
What does co-design look like when we talk about the intersection of technology and education? And more importantly, as we think about co-design, a lot of it is falling on the shoulders of the private sector and the individual companies in leading that work. What should district leaders demand? Like, how do we empower district leaders? What should they demand so that they can have a greater seat in creating a giant leap forward in this concept of co-design in education?
So one of the best AI companies that I've seen so far is a company out of Australia and Singapore called Literatu. And they worked with educators for the last 7 years. They're an AI company for the last 7 years around writing. And they've created a platform that's now integrated into the Singapore SLS, which is their student learning space. And that platform, the entire AI is embedded into the platform, but they've worked with the AI plus the student plus the teacher to think about what's the best user experience to teach students how to write and create micro courses for themselves. And they've had a significant amount of success because they've taken their time to really sort of co-design this. And I think having that approach is really important, but not just teachers, but having the students involved. And not from a perspective of, purpose or interest, right? Some students have to have a purpose, or you have to, have them follow their passion. If I have limited experiences, I don't know what my passion is. I got into teaching, I didn't know that it would have been a passion, right? And I was 23 at the time, and my passion was like, when is the next party? As a district leader, I would really think of, if content is a commodity, then human becomes the premium. If human is the premium, then learning how to think and use mental models is the superpower. And if we can spend more time with that, then we can go back and now look at the ed tech companies and say, let's go through this in sequence. The first order of business is we want the busyness out the way. The second order of business is we want to create more human connection. How do we do that? Now we have a different conversation versus, hey, I'm at one of the big tech firms and this is my experience in school, so I'm going to tell you what you need.
What are the top 3 considerations for district leaders so they can lead effectively in the context of this emerging technology?
So I think what district leaders need to focus on in terms of 3 steps is A, energize the overall population. So energize the students, energize the parents, energize the staff, right? And that energizer can come all in one place. It could come in a message, but that would be the first thing, to energize. The second thing would be to find a common north. Really understand, what is the job that we're trying to do? I'm, one that talks about unlocking stranded brilliance. That's a common north that I use and a lot of other schools have used as well. But what is that common north, and how can we lock into that and understand what that means? And an extension of that then is to find principles based on that common north. And once we have the principles on that common north, then really work backwards to allow the schools and the students the flexibility to create protocols based on those principles.
Have you seen good examples of that happening? And what are some practical steps some district leaders can take to bring this vision to life?
So one of the key pieces of technology is when it becomes so embedded in your life that it feels like a part of your life. And so Apple spent a significant amount of time on continuity. So all of your devices work together. They create this relationship. It's really hard to break. And they've been very, very successful at that. In terms of education, the person that I can think of is the former director of education at the Toronto District School Board, a gentleman by the name of John Malloy. And he's now moved on to California. But he really took 3 basic principles and said to all the different schools, these are the 3 basic principles that we're going to focus on in terms of the protocols, how you want to interpret those principles. You can go ahead and do that. And it really created a movement in terms of the overall board.
And, at Saga Education, as we think about tutoring, similar to your perspective, we believe that education is always going to be human-led. And as we think about artificial intelligence, we feel like this is a really great pathway to approach scaling tutoring, but not in a way in which we use it to supplant those human connections. We're really thinking about it from the lens of how do we use these technologies to enhance the effectiveness, enhance the quality of tutoring that's taking place. But tell me a little bit more from your perspective. What are you concerned or excited about in the intersection of AI and personalization or differentiation for kids?
So I think that tutoring is the elephant in the room. I actually call it the shadow school industry. So most places in the world, there is a quiet, unspoken truth that if you don't have tutoring, you will not thrive or perform as highly as you can. So if you are in the Caribbean, where I'm from, where the system is based on the Cambridge British system, we call it lessons, and that happens after school. And if you're going to get into one of the best schools, or if you hope to go to post-secondary, you have to take part in that. If you're in Korea, this is a reality. If you're in China, this is a reality. If you're in India, this is a reality. If you're in countries across Africa, this is a reality. And here in North America, it quietly is a reality as well. People know that, there's certain mass support you're going to have to outsource. And it is probably one of the biggest reasons for inequities in education. So I think bringing or scaling tutoring is extremely important. And I think AI has the ability to enhance the human component in terms of insights, in terms of understanding where students are struggling specifically, and being able to do that at scale. Now, some people have thought, gosh, we can go do this and it's just going to be, AI only. I'm not 100% sure that we're there yet. I think that there needs to be a huge human component for reasons that we described before. People want to make these connections. They want to make positive connections with other people. And I think having tutors that are empowered by AI and having students that are empowered by AI creates the possibilities for better connections. The other thing that I think is important is just-in-time tutoring. So being able to tutor, not waiting for after school, but in that moment. One of the models that I've seen that people have been curious about is, can we have an AI tutor that's there with a human tutor in the classroom while the teacher is teaching? So in that moment, a student can almost have a breakout with the AI and this person to say, hey, this is something that we're working on. Can you help me with this? We know from evidence that the best time for you to learn is immediately after you've made a mistake, when it's meaningful. So actually, while you're going through an assessment, that moment when you make the mistake, that's actually the best moment to learn.
There's so many exciting things to unpack from what you just said. This concept of like a shadow education system is really fascinating to me, because what's the number one thing you do the moment you realize your child is falling behind academically? Like, you get a tutor for them, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember I was recently presenting at an event for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, talk about the work that we're doing at Saga Education with artificial intelligence. And I asked everyone in the room, like, Raise your hand if you worked with a tutor before. A number of people did. And then I asked a follow-up question. Raise your hand if that tutoring was provided by your school or district, and not a single person raised their hand. And I find that absolutely fascinating that tutoring has existed outside the ecosystem of K-12 education. And now we have the opportunity with AI to find a way for school to empower schools and districts to make this part of the fabric of school design. You can target critical growth years. You can target critical subjects. And right now in the conversation with AI and tutoring, it's often like, you just use the AI chatbots, or it's just like you have your purists, you just use your human tutors. But I think there's a way in which an area worthy of exploration is how can you optimize and leverage the best of what both of those things do.
If I want to become excellent at track and field, at some point I'm going to have to do squats. And squats aren't fun. I may have to do them till I throw up, right? But if I find myself in the zone of proximal development and I see where I'm going and I can get really comfortable with that level of discomfort and I find success, the dopamine at the end of success will drive me forward. It will propel me. And I think that with tutoring, you have the opportunity to find that right space, right? If we're in school and we become overwhelmed, we're outside the zone of proximal development. We throw our hands up. Oh no, I'm not a math person, which may just be, I'm not a person that's ready to do math at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is very different than I'm not a math person. Or I missed a couple of days where these foundational concepts were not there, and now I've lost the building blocks or the foundation for the building blocks that come further. And so I think being able to find that is important. The other that I think is, and I've mentioned before, which is learning how to learn and creating workflows. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Muhammad Ali, and Floyd Mayweather all have two things in common. They all have a claim at the spot of being the greatest, and they all have coaches. So even the best of the best, they've had coaches from the beginning of their career to the very end of their career. At no point did they not have a coach. At no point did LeBron James say, I don't need a head coach. At no point was Muhammad Ali not having a person in his corner. So you have to have these people in your corner to bring and curate this information and to help you through to really be optimized. Even CEOs have executive coaches to help them do that. And so I think the opportunity of tutoring is not to look at it from a point of view of deficit, but to look at it from a point of view of optimization, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, when I was going to school, the kids that had the tutors, at the top end of it are typically not the kids that were struggling. These were the kids that were performing really high.
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, because what we're talking about here is thinking differently about school design in the future. And there's an opportunity for us to think about how to integrate personalization and tutoring in the context of thinking about this new system or strategy around, technology and AI. The other thing we're talking about here is a synergy between technology and human tutors, because let's say with the relationship with the human tutor, maybe that can motivate students to take the time more seriously on the technology. And if the students are taking the time on the technology more seriously, the data generated from that could be more helpful to the tutor.
One of the biggest ways that students have used digital to transform is in the arts. So if you think of like dancing, right? So when I was a kid, I used to break dance. I had maybe 10 moves. And now I look at the proliferation of breakdancing through YouTube, and it's amazing. But what's also interesting to me is that even with the millions and millions of views, the millions and millions of videos, how many videos I can look at the twins doing their moves, people still get together, right? Kids still get together with another mentor or another tutor in that particular space to help them through the hardest parts, right? So the technology brings you to a level and gives you that confidence, and that next hard part still needs a human relationship. And I think it's getting everybody to that next part and knowing where that human piece fits in to kind of move you ahead, and to really use the digital pieces and the AI pieces to sort of sit with the information, to spin it around, to think about it, and then to get back into this human interaction that kind of forces you over, is really important. If you've gone to university, you could, I went to university and I thought, I don't really need my professor. Year one and year two, I just read my books and go to the exams. But year three and year four, I really do want to have the coffee with the professor at that point, because that's going to help me to go to the next level. So I think getting everybody to that place where we have a place for the AI, we have a place for the tutoring, we're not getting into these false binary conversations about human and not human, but we're looking at how do we curate all of the technologies and innovation, old and new, to do things that we've always wanted to do that we couldn't do before at scale.
Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
They would definitely find me on LinkedIn, Dwayne Matthews, OCT.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Follow us for more conversations with leading experts on AI next time on EdHeads.